Hello everybody and welcome to this week's Motor Trade Radio podcast powered by eBay Motors Group. It is Saturday the 19th of November and you're joined by myself, Philip Nuthard.
And me, Curtis Hutchinson. This is episode 62, season 8 of Motor Trade Radio, bringing you all the chatter that matters. Once again, we've gathered together this week's big car retailing stories across the franchised and independent sectors for you to enjoy all in one place, on demand, on your podcast feed.
Well, before we talk about, the big news of the week, the big story of the week, but we have got a few shout outs this week. So if you haven't caught up with the interview with Steve Young from ICDP this week, it was published, I think, Wednesday morning of this week. We will be playing a clip of it partway through today's podcast, but I would urge you have a listen to that. Very, very insightful and always good conversation with Steve when he comes on the show into Curtis. We go into one sort of area and then we end up talking about a multitude of topics across the sector. But as always, he was on form and we were focusing on the conversation around the top 50 European report, which has only just been published this week.
Yeah, it's been published by Automotive News Europe. And yes, every year Steve Young and the ICDP team produce this top 50 listing of the biggest dealer groups across Europe. And we cover it every year, don't we?
Yes.
We always do a sort of deep dive into it and pull out some of the top performing UK companies. So it was great to catch up with Steve on the eve of it being published because he kind of gave us the inside track on the sort of movers and shakers, who was up, who was down. And as you say, we'll have a clip of that later on in the show.
Yeah. And ML Frey is still at number one, by the way, if you are wondering.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, by a long way, by a long way.
They're not being caught up for some time, are they, in that European market? But they are still at number one, still significantly ahead of everybody else. But actually, there has been some movers, and it's worth hanging on for that, having listened to that interview. And we want to wish the best for the forthcoming awards next week. So next week, I'm sure many of the listeners will either be there or involved with it somehow, or sort of remember the days when they did go or not going or whatever. But last year, they were back to back. I think you and I remember, Curtis, that both the Motor Trade Awards and the Car Dealer Awards were both sort of day after each other, I think.
Yes, but this year there's a few days between them, which I think will be welcomed by a lot of people who tend to go to both events. So the Motor Trader Awards are on Wednesdays, that's 23rd of November. They'll be at the Grosvenor House Hotel once again. And in fact, I was talking to John Kerwin, the editor of Motor Trader, just a couple of days ago, and plans are well in place now. It looks like it's going to be a really good turnout, and there's a lot of categories to get through. And it should be a really good evening. So anyone who's been shortlisted, good luck. And anyone who's going, have a great evening.
Yeah, definitely. And as you said, that's followed by the Car Dealer Used Car Awards. And that is at the brewery again down in London, obviously by Car Dealer magazine there. And that's on Monday, the 28th of November. So again, probably a similar kind of audience going to both of them events. But good luck to those who have been nominated or shortlisted for both those events, and have a fantastic time in London.
And if you'd like to get in touch with us, come on the show or send us a press release, then just email us at motortraderadio@yahoo.com. You can also join the Motor Trade Radio LinkedIn and Facebook groups, or follow us on Twitter. And also, don't forget, we have a newsletter now, a new newsletter on LinkedIn. So what we're doing every week, and we've done this for the last couple of weeks, is on Monday morning, we issue all the headlines that we talk about over the course of the podcast with a brief synopsis, but also the URL to the full story, so you can go off and have a look in more detail. So do look out for that Monday morning.
Yeah, and to that point, we will share the link to the European Dealer Top 50 as well, that we just mentioned earlier on the ICDP interview, because at the time of the recording with Steve, it wasn't published. but it is now live, and we will share that link as well. So, in terms of news, then we know we've got the interview snippet from Steve, but what are the headlines this week, Curtis?
Headlines this week are from Car Dealer, AM, and Motor Trader. And surprise, surprise, we'll lead with the autumn budget. So we'll see how that affects the car retailing sector. Other headlines: new car PCP payments have jumped by over 40% on some models. Drivers are holding on to cars longer due to the cost of living crisis. The demand for the Fiesta increases following Ford's end of production announcement, and employees take over a car dealership, Peter Ambrose of Castleford, after founder agrees sale. So, an interesting story to wrap up on, because at Peter Ambrose, they've kind of gone full circle. So we'll get to that at the end of the show.
Yeah, exactly. So as Curtis said there, the first story is over with Car Dealer magazine. So thanks to these guys for doing a sort of a brief overview of some of the early outcomes and impacts from the autumn budget of this week. And it does state that electric cars to pay vehicle excise duty from 2025 as top paid car dealers told to pay more tax. Now, what he is referring, what Cardiel are referring to there is obviously they are now looking at putting the electric vehicles, zero emission vehicles, in line with their combustion engine taxation or VED from the 1st of April 2025, and they've actually lowered the threshold for the 45 pence rates of tax down to £125 and 125 140. I don't know, why do they get
Yeah,
125 140? I never.
yeah, there
There
must be
must
a
be
really,
what is
really
the
good reason for that
what is the
£140.
calculation that you don't just round
Yes.
it? There must be something in there. So yeah, obviously, so from a car dealer perspective, those that are earning over 125,000 are going to pay more tax, and obviously those electric vehicle drivers are also going to be paying more tax as well. But this is also backdated as well, so it does hit the earlier registration of electric vehicles. It's also for cars and it's also for vans. So quite a significant hit to the sector, that one, I think, Curtis.
Yeah, definitely. And hats off to Car Dealer, because they posted their story within an hour of Jeremy Hunt's getting to his feet to announce the budget. So a quick turnaround there. I suspect they'll be updating that story as some of the detail gets released. But it's interesting what you say, Phil, because the VED rates, yes, they will be introduced for battery electric vehicles, but you actually know what the rates will be, don't you?
Yeah, so it's been published that the new zero emission cars registered on or after the 1st of April 2025 will be liable to pay the lowest first rate of VED, which currently applies to CO2 emissions from 1 to 50 grams per kilomile. So that is currently at £10 on the first year of registration, followed by £165 per year. And then the next one after that is that the for vehicles registered from the 1st of April 2017, and between that date and the 31st of March 2025, will also start to pay that new standard rate. They've also changed the 40,000 expensive car supplement as well to include electric vehicles into that. So it's quite a big sort of impact there, and I think there's a couple of things with this. It's been commented by Ian Plummer and a couple of others in the story there, that we know at the minute that the appetite and demand for electric vehicles is being influenced by the energy crisis. It is
Mm.
giving, because it's quite expensive now to charge your electric vehicle up
Yeah.
on
Yeah.
either at home compared to what it was previously on your tariff, but definitely on the public charging infrastructure. I've heard stories taking an iPace from 10% charge up to 80% charge would cost you £75 at some
Wow.
charging points. So it's already starting to impact. So we know that there is a definite correlation between that total cost of ownership of an electric vehicle and the appetite towards them. And I suppose the question is going to be is what will happen with these taxations now. We knew that there's something had to be done. It was just what and when it was already be done, because we knew that the Treasury was losing significant amount of money through the drop in taxation from combustion engine at the pumps, etc. But I'm not sure this is probably either the right answer or the right time to do it. I don't know. What do you think, Curtis?
I agree. We knew it was coming, and we knew it was coming in April 2025. There's never a good time
No.
to introduce new taxes, but this is really going to hit a lot of dealers and potentially a lot of buyers who will think twice. If they're considering going down the EV route at the moment, they've, as you say, they've got the challenge of rising utility charges, and this might just tip them back into the internal combustion engine camp, and look for petrol and diesel alternatives.
Yeah, and there is I say we knew that something was coming, but I think there's a general feeling. I think that the sector is on a road of recovery from the shortage of supply of new vehicles through the period of the pandemic and following war in Ukraine there. But it's just whether the cost of living, energy crisis, and now these taxation rulings sort of pending on electric vehicles could actually slow that recovery down. We're not so sure.
Yeah, yeah. We'll see how this one plays
But
out.
I mean, it's a great story, and there are a
Yeah,
couple of comments in the story. You've got Ashley Barnett there from head of fleet consultancy at Lex Auto Lease, saying that the electric vehicle market has grown exponentially in recent years, creating a shortfall in motoring tax revenue. However, when coupled with rising vehicle and electricity prices, we must remain cautious of introducing further barriers to adoption. So again, sort of highlighting there that some of these barriers could slow that adoption down.
yeah. So next headline is from Car Dealer, and it is new car PCP payments have jumped by over 40% on some models. That's 40%. So yeah, this is some research covered by Car Dealer from What Car, which has compared typical finance deals across 5 popular models which were on sale in 2019 and comparing them with today. Now, the 5 models are the Ford Puma mini hatchback, Seat Ateca, Volkswagen Golf, and Volvo XC40. So all of which have been on sale in the same guise, from 2019 to today. And what it's found is that the average monthly PCP payment has risen by at least 22.4% across this sample of models, with petrol and hybrid versions of the Volvo XC40 recording a 42.5% rise in average monthly payments. And it is an interesting, this one, because while 3 of the 5 models compared were actually cheaper to buy via finance than cash in 2019, all 5 models cost more to buy via finance today. So yeah, I mean,
Well, there's probably a few things behind this one, and we were talking, weren't we, before the show that there's not a lot of mention about the finance rate or the APR in this, and we know that APRs have been on the rise for in recent months around the PCP, because it's all backed against that base rate, and we know the base rate's been on the increase of the Bank of England there. So you can see why some of these PCP, because you've got your front end loan, which you'll be paying interest on, and you're also paying interest on your balloon payment or guaranteed future value on that vehicle. At the same time, you've had increase in on the road prices of new cars, and you're getting less discount and less incentives now as to what you were in 2019 as well. I mean, if you remember back, Curtis, there was significant levels of incentives, deposit contribution, cashback, guaranteed PX. There was all sorts, weren't there,
uh,
available
but
on a
yeah,
new
but
car.
back in the days of 0% APR
And
on
0%
PCPs.
APRs,
Yes.
exactly, exactly. So you've got this whole thing starting to come along now that has pushed that sort of monthly payment up, and they're not necessarily increasing the residual value. So you're not seeing the benefit of the future used car prices of these PCPs, but you are being hit at the front end by fewer incentives, higher interest rates, and higher on the road prices for much of the market. So kind of shocking, isn't it, that we hear stories, and I don't know whether me and you were talking about it, Curtis, but I've heard a story where a Mercedes has gone up from £400 a month to £700 a month, and an increase of a deposit from 1,000 to 4,000 for an equivalent car
Yeah.
over a period, and that's because of those factors that are taking place.
And it is going to hit motorists hard because, as we've been saying for a few years now, buyers look at those monthly payments. That seems to be how they budget for their next car purchase. It's those monthly payments rather than the sticker price overall. And if those PCP monthly rates are going up, then maybe they're going to be looking at alternative ways of funding.
Or alternative vehicles.
Yeah.
Maybe that we'll start to see a shift in terms of those buyer profiles of what vehicles they do buy now going forward because of affordability and that sort of available monthly outgoings. So it's going to be interesting to see how this starts to shift the market going forward. But sticking with sort of keeping cars and things like this, we're heading over to AM Online now, and this is from Close Brothers Motor Finance, who have done a bit of a survey with their customers, and this is about drivers holding onto cars longer due to the cost of living crisis.
Yeah, so it's found that almost a third of consumers, that's 32%, are planning to hold on to their current vehicle for longer than planned. And that's down to the cost of living crisis. So no big surprise there. Now, the research goes on to show that 1 in 10 drivers have sacrificed the vehicle they wanted in favor of a cheaper car. So that kind of references the point you've just made about PCPs. If those monthly rates are going up, you're going to be looking at something cheaper, and it could take you into a cheaper or smaller car. And it goes on to say that nearly 9% of buyers would actually consider buying a motorbike instead to save on travel costs. Now, when I saw this, I immediately thought of Robert Forrester because, of course, he's expanding the motorbike division of
Yes.
Virtue Motors, so that'll be welcome news to him. Well, sort of bittersweet news, I guess, for
Mm.
for, for Robert.
Yeah, definitely. And there's a little bit in the story here with Motorpoint did a survey recently, and they talk about owners of cars that are at least 10 years old are less likely to swap them for newer models. And I suppose, and that's talking about during this sort of cost of living crisis. And I suppose there's an element of if you're driving a 10-year-old car, does it matter if you keep that car just that little bit longer if you're not in that 3-year cycle or 2-year cycle or wanting that newer car on your driveway? That kind of does make a little bit of sense there, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, and I was particularly interested in some of the results on financing. So, 11% of the respondents said they will be exploring finance options to be able to afford their preferred car. So, when asked where they would turn to help spread the cost of their next purchase, 24%, so almost a quarter, would look to specialist finance providers. 17% would use a bank loan, 9% would use buy now, pay later, and 4% would borrow from friends and family.
So lots going on,
Yeah.
and so sticking with the sort of dealer market here as well a little bit, but there's a great story in motortrader.com, and I think we've talked about this a little bit, haven't we, around EVs and tyres, but they're talking about EV and PHEV uptake opportunity for dealers to boost tyre sales. Now, this is from some work from Judge Services with Neil Adley, and this is fascinating view of actually looking at the revenue opportunities from alternative fuel vehicles, particularly EVs and plug-in hybrids.
Yeah, and Neil makes the point, and I work with the judge service guy, so I've actually seen the research that this is based on, and he makes the valid point that the first point of defection from franchise workshops is for tyres. So you buy your new car from a franchise dealer. If you need a new tyre, you go to a fast fit operator, and that is very much the sort of first point of defection. So what Neil's been looking at is the opportunity for dealers to retain more of their tyre business as they sell more and more, especially battery electric vehicles and to a certain extent plug-in hybrids as well. So the research shows that for most car owners, the preferred outlet for new tyres are those fast fit operators. So that's about 40%, and local independents account for 30%. But the research goes on to show that 16% of owners return to the franchise dealers that supplied the car in the first place. But only 6% of them have tyre plans in place. And Neil's making the point that tyre plans are really the way to start
Mm.
retaining that business now.
Yeah, because I think we've talked before, haven't we, about the evidence of that sort of tyre wear from obviously the torque and weight of particularly
Yeah.
electric vehicles, that you do get that increased tyre usage on them. So it would be a good time to sort of, like you say, get these tyre care plans in place within the business and actually start to take the opportunity to get into that alternative fuel market and use this as an opportunity for further revenue there. So great spot there, and hopefully we will get to hear from Neil in the coming weeks as well.
You're listening to All the Chatter That Matters on Motor Trade Radio, powered by eBay Motors Group. This is your weekly one-stop shop for all the biggest car retailing headlines from across the media, available on demand wherever you are on your podcast feed. And now, here's leading industry guru and MD of ICDP, Steve Young, sharing some of his views on the recently released Top 50 European dealer groups.
We want to talk more about at this stage around the you're at that time of the year now where you begin to look at and pull together and publish the latest in the top 50 European dealer group ranking, which will be published with Automotive News Europe as always in the coming days. But I wanted to sort of get a heads up on in terms of, without giving too much detail about the content of the report, but what are your key findings and what are your thoughts around the rankings this year?
Well, obviously the external factors, affect the top 50 as they affect all dealers, as they affect anyone in the industry. So um, the issues with availability of new cars, has an impact, and that's encouraged the a switch to used cars and to do what they can in aftermarket and so on. So you can't get away from that. But uh, the top 50 itself is actually quite stable. We've had uh, one German company out, one French company in, down at the sort of lower end of the ranking. So but the actual constituent members are the same as last year, with that one exception. But there has been quite a lot of movement of individual companies, um, where as the result mainly of acquisitions, and in one or two cases not doing as good a job on the used cars as as their peers. So when you look at the list, you'd say, well, okay, same as ever. Emil Frey's still there, Penske's still there, sitting at the top. But what struck me was that as I think about the top 50 and the interactions we have with some of the top 50 around Europe compared to a few years ago, is the way in which they have, converged in terms of the operating model. In a recent blog on that topic last week, I think that they look more and more like sort of the UK groups, even though 3/4 of them are outside of the UK. But the operating model, the way they approach the business, has become more similar over the last 5 or 10 years. And that's my main takeaway is not to do with really what's showing in the league table, but actually what sits behind those businesses.
And as ever, I mean, the UK dealer groups seem to do always pretty well in the rankings, don't they?
Well, the trends towards sort of large groups and large groups with an operating model as opposed to a holding company approach, which was not unusual in continental Europe before, got off to a head start here. I mean, I think people have different views of Pendragon and the history and Trevor Finn's influence on the world, but I think that one thing you can certainly say is it set the ball rolling in terms of building large groups, through acquisition as well as organic growth, and operating them to some varying degree from the center. And even the people who came out from Pendragon and then set up their own groups or joined other groups have taken them in that direction. And that influence really in the UK goes right the way down. If I go and visit a relatively small regional group that's sitting at number 90 or something in the AM100, then you find many of the same practices as you'll find in the top 5 or the top 10.
Well, as always, always great chatting with Steve, and we do make the point at the end of the interview with Steve on the full episode that we can sit and talk for hours because we do tend to digress into other areas. But as he's saying there, I mean, Emil Frey still very much dominating that European top 50. But some significant movers, particularly from UK operators now in that top 10. Because I think we have 6
Yeah.
out of the 10 in the
Yeah,
top
6
10
out
now.
of the 10 and 12 UK groups in the listings as a whole. Personally, I'd make that 13 if we were to include Penske, which operates obviously
Yes.
sitting
Yeah.
mostly in the UK. So a really strong showing, and stronger showing than last year for UK groups. And
Yeah.
Steve does make the point that the UK franchise sector does very much lead the way in Europe. If you're looking to continental Europe for best practices, okay, you're going to find some, but it's mostly the other way around. I think they're looking at us for best practices.
Yeah, there is a lot of focus on UK and sort of European market as well. So yeah, again, do listen to the full episode there with Steve. Great interview as always, and he's on every month now. So don't miss that. It was published on Wednesday earlier of this week. It was also on a newsletter. I think are we doing it? We've got the link on the newsletter.
Yeah,
I'm going to put a link on the newsletter to
yeah,
it.
on the newsletter that goes out on Monday, we'll supply a link to that top 50 and the podcast as
Yeah,
well.
so do join into that one. So we're heading back to AM Online now, and sort of expanding on the Fiesta story. We've covered it a couple of times. One where they were going to suspend it for 6 months, but they were going to return to production. We didn't think that was going to be right. Anyway,
Yep.
subsequently,
We didn't believe them.
No, not at all. Subsequently, they have ended production, but there's a lot of talk about obviously pent up demand and activity around the iconic Fiesta now. Now that it's not in production, that there is a bit of appetite towards the vehicle, and that is that you've probably got people walking into showrooms or still wanting to upgrade their Fiesta for a new model and finding that they can't go and order a new one now and will have to go into the used car market. So, it's a good outcome for the Fiesta in the end.
It is, yeah. And obviously now a lot of demand for new Fiestas. We saw only last month it returned to the number 1 slot in terms of best sellers, big month on month, year on year increases there as word gets out that it's on run out. But this story is particularly interesting because it's based on some data from Dealer Auction, which looks at retail margin, and it has this regular retail margin monitor, and it shows a jump in the volume of Ford Fiestas sold with a 17% increase, a 17% increase on the previous month, and an average profit margin in October of £1,610, which for a Fiesta is pretty
It's
good
not bad,
going,
is
isn't
it?
it?
Yeah, no, it's all right, but it is at a time where we've got a reasonable, good margins across the sector, haven't we? As we've spoke about many times there. But to put that in a little bit of context, that number one in terms of average retail margin is the Land Rover Discovery Sport, which has got a average retail margin retention of 3,720. So the margins are pretty good out there, and even they do talk about the XC60 at 2,680, and even the